Forget what you've heard, Greenland isn't empty because it's cold. The real reason nobody lives there is way messier, and it has nothing to do with icebergs. Greenland is the world's largest island, over 3 times the size of Texas. But fewer people live there than in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Why? You might think it's obvious. It's cold, remote, basically one giant ice cube. But the real story is a lot messier. First, Greenland has been lying to you. It's not that green, it's blinding white. 80% of the island is covered in ice. An ice sheet up to 1.9 miles, 3 kilometers thick in some spots. That's half the height of Mount Kilimanjaro, but a lot colder and flatter. There is soil lurking underneath, plus mountains and canyons. But farming? Forget it. The branding team oversold it. Greenland was actually green 2.5 million years ago. Since then, it's been cryogenically frozen. Greenland's glaciers are basically iceberg factories. They dump giant chunks into the North Atlantic, forcing ships to play dodgeball. Remember the Titanic? Yeah, pin that one on Greenland. Icebergs can be as tall as New York City apartment towers, except you don't need 6 roommates to afford one. And that's just the tip. 90% is underwater. These icebergs aren't just sinking ships, they're also sinking Greenland's trade prospects. But more on that later. Residents squeeze onto a thin coastal strip. But even though Greenland is huge, 836,000 square miles, 2.16 million kilometers squared, the ice-free land is only about the size of Sweden minus IKEA. And parts of that coastal strip are useless too. The southeast is so bleak even wildlife stays clear. When you scare off history's most aggressive colonizers, your geography is doing something right. In coastal communities, people make a living by fishing. And more fishing. Oh, and whaling, so basically, big fishing. Greenland doesn't have many industries keeping it afloat. Except one surprising one, but that might actually be a headache. Even animals give southeast Greenland the cold shoulder. Muskox? Fine up north. Caribou? Plenty out west. In the southeast? Nothing. Just ice and bad vibes. Even the small Arctic hare doesn't want to live there. Why? First, this region gets pummeled with snow. Not snow day, snow 11 billion metric tons in one megastorm back in March 2022. It snowed so much that Greenland's ice sheet briefly stopped shrinking. Take that. Climate change. Local currents steer every storm right into the southeast. Winds, atmospheric rivers, snow all delivered to the same unlucky address. As if blizzards weren't enough, there are katabatic winds, locals call them Piteraq, that which attacks you. These are supercooled air masses that gravity hurls toward the Atlantic at hurricane force up to 160 miles per hour, 257 kilometers per hour. One Piteraq in 1970 blew half the town of Tasiilaq apart. At least 15 times a year, winds exceed 40 miles per hour, 64 kph. No wonder the animals stay away. When those winds tumble down the west side, they get a rebrand foe in winds and crank winter temperatures up by 20 degrees Fahrenheit, 11 degrees Celsius. Life upgrades from freeze off your limbs to just lose your fingers cold. That's why people actually manage to live on the west and southwest coast. Manage being the key word. Greenland is sandwiched between the Arctic and North Atlantic Ocean. The closest landmass is Canada, not Toronto and Vancouver, Canada, but tundra and windswept snowstorm Canada. The nearest Canadian city is Iqaluit, population to 7,400, which is almost 500 miles, 805 kilometers, from Greenland's capital. Getting there means crossing some of the stormiest waters on Earth. Squalls, rogue waves, and a non-stop reminder that the sea doesn't want you there. In winter, more than 10% of waves are over 12 feet tall, 3.6 millimeters. Fall in, and the water is between 30 degrees Fahrenheit, -1 degree Celsius, and 43 degrees Fahrenheit, 6 degrees Celsius. Hypothermia in under 10 minutes. And that's before you factor in the multi-ton icebergs. The average iceberg in the Grand Banks area weighs 100,000 to 200,000 tons, size of a 1 5-story building. The big boys weigh up to 10 million tons. One parked itself next to a Greenlandic town a few years back. This is why Greenland has no shipping lanes to speak of. It's as connected as your uncle's flip phone. You'd think with modern tech, reaching Greenland would be easier. Nope. Weather changes faster than your Netflix queue. Fog, winds, icy storms roll in within hours. Flights are frequently delayed or cancelled for days. Even the capital, Nuuk, gets grounded by coastal storms. Boats can't work as a backup in winter. Honestly, it's impressive anyone showed up at all. The first Paleo-Inuit arrived 4,000–5,000 years ago. The Sakak people came around 2,500 BC, then disappeared by 800 BC. Over the years, at least 6 different Inuit cultures came and went, plus some Norse adventurers led by Erik the Red, who clearly needed better vacation ideas. The Norse arrived during the medieval warm period, when extra sunshine and fewer volcanic eruptions made winters unusually mild. When Erik the Red landed in southern Greenland, it actually looked a little green. Maybe he wasn't totally lying. He hyped it up back in Iceland. Come to Greenland. Sounds better than frozen Misery Island. And people joined him. They arrived to find one of the coldest places on Earth. Surprise! By 1500 AD, the Norse were gone. The warm period ended, their economy tanked, walrus ivory lost out to elephant ivory, and they lacked the tools and skills the Inuit had spent centuries perfecting. The Inuit adapted brilliantly. They invented the kayak to zip between ice packs. When winter froze the sea, they switched tactics. Dogs helped sniff out seal breathing holes in the ice. Hunters placed a hair over the opening. When it twitched, a seal was nearby. If they couldn't see, they pressed an ear to the ice and listened for hours. People were way more patient before the internet. They used a toggling harpoon, invented over 1,000 years ago. The head stuck in the seal, the shaft popped free. Suddenly, it was tug-of-war on ice. Meanwhile, Vikings were still figuring out how not to die in snowdrifts. The Inuit also dealt with polar bears. Today, there are 4,400 danger bears, 1 for every 10 Greenlanders. The Inuit built bows from muskox horn, tough enough to drop a polar bear. Vikings? Mostly farmers with swords. Even clothing was better. Inuit women used caribou fur with sinew in double rows of tiny stitches. When sinew got wet, it swelled shut, instant waterproofing. Vikings wore wool and probably argued about whether damp counted as weather-resistant. The Thule people showed up in the 1200s, shrugged off the conditions that wiped out the Norse, and their descendants are still there today. About 88% of Greenland's population is Inuit. Are the Inuit just tougher? One study found they carry gene variants that let their bodies make brown fat, the kind that actually generates heat. Most of us have useless white fat that just sits around reminding us to eat a salad. Scientists think the Inuit got these genes from the Denisovans, an ancient human offshoot. The Inuit diet is whales, seals, and fish. They have genetic mutations to process omega, 3 fatty acids from those animals. Nearly 100% of Greenlandic Inuit have these genes. Europeans? A measly 2%. That's why brie and parmesan cling to European waistlines like shrink wrap. So how does this tie back to Greenland's tiny population? The Inuit are the only ones truly built for it. There are only around 150,000, 160,000 Inuit in the world. A third already live in Greenland. Everyone else? The cold, the diet, the conditions, it's like the island itself is saying, don't bother. In 1500, Portuguese explorer Cortereal found Greenland completely iced over, detoured to Newfoundland, and went home to complain. It was the world's first 1-star Yelp review, keeping other Europeans away. Portugal claimed Greenland as Terra do Lavrador, but didn't hang on. 2 centuries later, Denmark swooped in. Missionary Hans Egede arrived, searching for Norse settlers, who had already been gone for 200 years. That's how isolated Greenland was. Denmark grabbed it from Portugal with zero pushback, because nobody was lining up to colonize a frozen wasteland with no farmland. Bad timing. Erik the Red showed up during the medieval warm period. Hans Egede arrived right in the middle of the Little Ice Age. In 1776, Denmark locked down Greenland with a trade monopoly that lasted until 1950. No cotton, no tobacco, no gold, just ice. Not exactly a colony Europe was racing to snatch. In the 1950s, Denmark decided to modernize Greenland by forcing people out of coastal villages into Nuuk to make them more Danish. The result? Collapse of traditional Inuit communities and the highest suicide rate in the world. Turns out you can't bulldoze centuries of culture and expect everyone to smile about it. Today, the capital, Nuuk, is the biggest city, about 19,800 people, 40% of Greenland's total. That's less than an average Taylor Swift concert. Population density: 0.36 people per square mile, 0.14 per square kilometers. The least densely populated place on Earth. Runner-up Mongolia has 5.5 people per square mile, over 15 times denser. 2/3 of the island is above the Arctic Circle. Winter temperatures plunge to -58 degrees Fahrenheit, -50 degrees Celsius. The average in Nuuk between January and March is 10 degrees Fahrenheit, -12 degrees Celsius. Summer highs limp along at 46 degrees Fahrenheit, 7.8 degrees Celsius. The year-round average in the capital, 31 degrees Fahrenheit, -0.7 degrees Celsius. Weather that would wipe out half of Los Angeles. The northeast is an Arctic desert, getting less rainfall than the Sahara and fewer camels. The south gets about 35 inches, 90 centimeters, annually, same as Chicago, but farming is still on hard mode. The only thing that works? Sheep, and only at Greenland's southernmost tip. Glaciers stripped away most of the soil, leaving behind rock-hard bedrock. In the south, the ground is 3.8 billion years old. Great for geology, bragging rights, terrible for farming. A study of 23 cultivated sites found 99% of soil was hydrophobic, water repellent. Greenland's dirt has commitment issues. Trees? The World Bank says only 0.000054% of Greenland is forested, basically just Chingwa Valley in the south. Most reports round that down to zero. Why? Exposed bedrock, poor soil, and Greenland is too far from any seed-rich neighbourhood. Nearest greenery is 500 miles away in Iqaluit, or 850 miles in Newfoundland. Too far for birds or wind to help. No trees means no timber, but the Inuit had a hack. Seal fat oil for light and warmth. They used every part of the seal. Fishing made up 87% of Greenland's exports in 2019. Seals and whales can't be exported, protected status, so they're eaten locally. Greenland imports nearly all its food. Result? One of the most expensive places on Earth. Cost of living is 44% higher than the US. A family of 4 spends over $6,000 a month not include rent. Milkis, $6,000 a month not include rent. Milkis, 10 a gallon. About 17.4% of Greenlandic households live in poverty. There are few industries, heavy reliance on imports, and barely any infrastructure. Greenland's longest road is only 22 miles, 35 kilometers, built by Volkswagen as a cold-weather test track. Not to help anyone get groceries. Roads exist only inside towns and just stop at the edge. Even the tarmac gives up. Summer travel options: plane, boat or helicopter, if you're not a nervous flyer. Some settlements don't have runways, so helicopters are used for smaller areas. In winter, boats are useless because of floating ice death traps. Snowmobiles and dog sleds take over. No trains. Greenland has fewer people than Flagstaff, Arizona. You don't build freeways for ghost towns on ice. Even internet is a luxury. The island runs on 2 undersea cables to Iceland and Canada. Cost: $115, $150, $8 per month, nearly twice the US average. And it still buffers. Until November 2024, nobody could fly directly into Greenland. Nuuk's new runway finally opened, with 2 more airports planned for 2026. That brought 141,000 visitors in 2024, mostly cruise tourists, almost 3 times Greenland's population. Tourism now makes up 4.9% of GDP and employs 6.2% of the population. Greenland's massive ice sheet is melting, losing up to 110 million Olympic swimming pools worth every year. That means more minerals become accessible. Greenland sits on graphite, lithium, and rare earth stuff you need for Teslas, wind turbines, and military toys. China currently has a monopoly, 72% of US imports, 100% of Europe's. Suddenly, Greenland looks attractive. But the minerals are still under ice or bedrock. Greenland has a tiny workforce, almost no infrastructure, and environmental rules stricter than your mum's room cleaning checklist. And when climate change finally melts the ice enough for easy mining, we'll probably all be dead. Iceland and Alaska are smaller, but have more people because they're better located. Alaska is a transportation hub. FedEx has a huge center in Anchorage. Iceland sits right between Europe and North America, has the Gulf Stream keeping it warmer, and only 10–14% glacier cover compared to Greenland's 80%. Iceland's seas aren't clogged with iceberg death traps. Greenland? Not so lucky. Even today, icebergs still smash ships. In July 2025, one drifted into the harbour of Inuit. Bad news for a fishing village, only reachable by boat or plane. In 2018, a 10 million-ton iceberg parked itself outside the village of Inuit, visible from space, forcing all 200 residents to evacuate for fear of tsunami-like waves. And in Greenland, there's nowhere inland to go. Warmer temperatures are giving Greenland a longer growing season, maybe 100 days in the future. That would be great, except for the droughts. Classic Greenland. Pastures are drying out. Sheep farms are dwindling. The country's only commercial cattle farmer summed it up. No new jobs have been created, and agriculture is on its knees. There are only 38 sheep farmers left, and sheep make up 99% of Greenland's farmed meat. Now Greenland has wildfires. In 2017 and 2019, blazes near Sisimiut were so remote that satellites spotted them before people did. The 2019 fire happened on a day when temperatures hit 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius. Crazy high for Greenland, where the July normal is 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius. Heat plus dry tundra grasses create a tinderbox. Birth rates are dropping. People keep moving away. By 2040, the working age population is set to shrink by 16%. Fewer workers, same amount of ice. So if you think nobody lives in Greenland now, it's going to get that much worse in the future unless something drastic changes.